In the vast reaches of space, the Xilari homeworld of Veil Zora was burning. The planet, once a beacon of fierce independence and culture, was now under siege. The Dominion, a brutal and expansionist force, had descended upon the Xilari without mercy, determined to crush the planet and enslave its people. Their fleets filled the skies, darkening the horizon with an unrelenting storm of fire and steel. Yet, despite the overwhelming force, the Xilari warriors fought back with unmatched courage. But even they knew their numbers were dwindling, and their hope of victory was slipping away. Captain Darius Holt stood on the bridge of the human warship Vanguard, staring out at the smoke-choked atmosphere of Veil Zora. The mission was simple: evacuate as many civilians as possible before the planet fell. But nothing in war was ever simple. With every moment, the Dominion pressed harder, pushing back against the Xilari defenses and threatening to break through to the heart of the capital. Darius knew the stakes. He had been in combat for years, leading his squad through countless battles. But this was different. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for an entire species, a proud people who valued honor above all. As he prepared for the mission, Darius felt a strange weight on his shoulders, not just for the lives of his crew or the civilians he was about to save, but for something deeper. Something told him this mission would change his life forever. "Captain Holt, we've got a Priority 1 signal," said Lieutenant Caravans, his trusted second-in-command. She handed him the comms, her face as serious as the situation. "It's from the Xilari Royal Court." Darius glanced at the screen. The face of Queen Cyravaleth, the ruler of the Xilari, appeared. Even in the chaos, she maintained her regal composure, her eyes fierce with determination. "Captain Holt," Zyra's voice crackled over the comm, "I am in need of your assistance. My position is compromised. I am trapped with my advisors in the Central Palace. I require an immediate evacuation." Darius didn't hesitate. The Xilari Queen was known for her tactical brilliance and her unyielding spirit in battle, but even she couldn't fight off the Dominion forces alone. If they captured her, the Xilari would lose not just their leader, but any hope of resistance. "Hold tight, Your Majesty. We'll get you out," Darius replied, his voice firm. He turned to his team. "We're going in. Prepare for a hot extraction." The Vanguard dropped out of orbit, its engines roaring as it descended toward the surface of Veil Zora. Darius and his squad suited up, their faces hardening with the knowledge of what lay ahead. They were about to face an enemy that outnumbered them, with soldiers who would fight to the death to claim the Queen. But Darius wasn't just any leader. He was a human, and humans had a way of surprising their enemies. As they neared the palace, the city around them was in ruins. Fire and smoke billowed from shattered buildings, and the air was thick with the sounds of battle. But Darius didn't hesitate. With one swift command, his squad leaped into action. They fought their way through the streets, using their agility and resourcefulness to outsmart the Dominion soldiers. Every step was a struggle, but they pushed forward, knowing the Queen's life and the fate of the Xilari depended on them. When they finally reached the palace, they found Queen Cyra surrounded by a group of Dominion soldiers. Her armor was scratched and bloodied, but her gaze was unwavering. She had fought to the last, but now her strength was fading. Without a word, Darius charged, his squad following his lead. In a blur of motion, they dispatched the Dominion forces, their weapons cutting through the air with deadly precision. As the last soldier fell, Darius reached the Queen, offering her a hand. "We're getting you out of here, Your Majesty." Zyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. But in that moment, Darius saw something in her eyes, something beyond gratitude. It was a recognition, a spark of something that would set the course of their fates in motion. The extraction was just the beginning. What Darius had done today would change the future of the galaxy and his own life forever. The Vanguard soared back into space, leaving the burning remains of Veil Zora behind. The rescue mission had been a success, but the cost had been steep. The Dominion had made it clear that they wouldn't back down. Yet Darius Holt couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. He had pulled off the impossible, saving Queen Tyra Valeth, the fiercest ruler that Xilari had ever known, from the clutches of certain death. But as the warship continued its journey back to the safety of deep space, Darius knew that his actions would have far-reaching consequences. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. His decision to save the Queen had changed everything. Inside the warship's command center, Darius stood at the viewport, gazing out at the stars. Lieutenant Cara Vance approached him, her expression thoughtful. "You did it, Captain. We all did. But there's something more to this, isn't there?" Darius didn't reply at first. He was lost in thought, thinking about Xyra. Despite her fierce exterior, there had been something vulnerable in her eyes when he had pulled her from the wreckage of the palace, something that made him realize that his role in this conflict had just shifted in a way he couldn't have anticipated. "She's a queen, Cara. A ruler. I saved her life, but that's only the beginning," Darius said. He turned to face her, his voice quiet but resolute. "The Xilari will never forget this, and I think the Dominion will make us pay for this rescue." Cara nodded. "We've stirred up a hornet's nest, no doubt, but we'll fight it, like we always do." Her smile was faint, but it was reassuring. She had been by his side through thick and thin, and Darius knew he could trust her. Still, the situation was more complicated than they had ever faced before. As the warship made its way toward a nearby Xilari fleet, Darius received another communication. The holographic projection of Queen Xyra appeared in front of him, her face grave but still regal. "Captain Holt," she said, her voice firm, "I must thank you once again for saving my life. However, there is more at stake than our survival. You have earned my respect, and I would like to offer you something in return." Darius raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean, Your Majesty?" "I invoke the tradition of the life-debt matrimony," Xyra replied, her words heavy with ancient meaning. "You saved me. In Xilari custom, that means you are now bound to me, and I am bound to you. There is no turning back." Darius stared at her, shocked. He had heard of such traditions in passing, but he had never imagined it would apply to him. To be bound to an alien queen in such a way, he wasn't sure what to think. "Wait a minute. You're saying that because I saved your life, you expect me to marry you?" he asked, incredulous. Xyra's gaze didn't falter. "It is the way of my people, and it is not a question of choice. It is a matter of honor. Your refusal would be considered an insult to my people, and you would be exiled from Xilari space." Darius was speechless for a moment. Marrying an alien queen, what was he supposed to do with that? He had come to this mission to save lives, not to get entangled in political affairs or marry royalty. Yet, as he looked at Xyra, something shifted within him. This wasn't just a matter of politics. It was about survival, loyalty, and for some strange reason, a growing sense of responsibility. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice more a statement than a question. Xyra's expression softened slightly, though she remained regal. "I am. You have proven yourself in ways few others could. The Xilari will respect you, as will I. I offer you the chance to become part of my kingdom, Captain Holt, to stand beside me as we fight for the future of my people." Darius ran a hand through his hair, processing the magnitude of the offer. Marrying the queen wasn't something most men got to do. And as strange as it seemed, he knew there was more at stake here than just a political alliance. There was honor, there was duty, and there was the undeniable fact that he had grown to admire Xyra's strength and resolve. "You've got yourself a deal, Your Majesty," he finally said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "But this is going to be one hell of a ride." Xyra's lips curved into a smile, the faintest hint of approval in her eyes. "I look forward to it, Captain Holt. Together, we will shape the future." And with that, Darius' life would never be the same again. The days that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty. Captain Darius Holt stood at the helm of the Vanguard, his mind racing as the events of the past few days weighed heavily on him. He had saved the life of Queen Sci-Fi, the mighty ruler of the Xilari, and in doing so, had unknowingly bound himself to her. The tradition of the life debt matrimony was ancient, and the consequences of accepting or rejecting it were monumental. He had chosen to accept, but as the warship made its way through the stars, Darius couldn't shake the feeling that his decision was about to set off a chain of events that could change the galaxy forever. The alliance between humans and Xilari was still young, and not everyone aboard the Vanguard was pleased with the situation. Lieutenant Caravance, his trusted second-in-command, was one of the few who didn't hide her concerns. She found him in the ship's mess hall, leaning over a steaming cup of coffee, his brow furrowed in thought. "You really going through with this, Darius?" she asked, taking a seat across from him. He didn't look up at first, but his voice was steady when he replied. "I don't have much of a choice, Kara. This isn't just about me anymore. The Xilari need their queen, and I've made a commitment to stand by her. Besides, what choice do we have in the face of the Dominion?" Kara sighed, clearly conflicted. "I know you think you're doing the right thing, but you've just agreed to marry a queen from another species, a queen who's been at war with the Dominion for years. You're about to get pulled into a whole new world of politics, Darius. And I've got to wonder, what happens when the Dominion finds out?" Darius finally met her gaze, his expression serious. "That's exactly why I need to stay close to her. If we want to stop the Dominion, we need to show them that we're united. The Human-Xilari alliance could be the key to ending this war." Kara shook her head, not entirely convinced. "I hope you know what you're doing. It's not just about saving lives anymore. It's about playing a game that could cost you everything." Before Darius could respond, the ship's AI interrupted their conversation with a soft chime. "Captain Holt, we have arrived in Xilari space. Queen Zyra is requesting your presence immediately." Darius nodded, pushing his chair back and standing. "I'll be there in a moment." As he made his way to the royal chamber of the Vanguard, Darius couldn't help but feel the weight of what he had agreed to. Marrying a queen wasn't something that happened to ordinary men, and yet, here he was, about to enter into a union that would be watched by the galaxy. The thought both terrified and intrigued him. What kind of life would this be? How would he balance his duty as a captain with his new role as the consort to an alien queen? He entered the chamber to find Queen Sci-Fi standing by the window, looking out at the stars. She turned as he entered, her gaze steady and intense. There was no warmth in her eyes, only the cold calculation of a ruler. Yet there was something else there too, something softer, something human. "Captain," she said, her voice measured, "we must begin preparations for our marriage. The ceremony will take place in 2 days, on the Xilari homeworld. The council is already discussing the implications of our union. Many will be watching, and some will resist." Darius nodded, his mind racing. "I know the stakes, Your Majesty. But what about the Dominion? What if they attack during the ceremony?" Zyra's expression remained unchanged. "We will be ready. My people have endured worse. But your involvement in this war is more than a political move. It is a statement. The Dominion will understand the significance of what we are doing. We are not just 2 species working together. We are creating a bond that cannot be broken, and the universe will take notice." Darius felt a strange sense of determination rising within him. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about fighting for something bigger than himself. "Then we'll make sure the ceremony is more than just a symbol," he said. "We'll show the Dominion that we're not afraid. Together, we can win this war." Sarah regarded him with a flicker of approval in her eyes. "You are beginning to understand, Captain Holt. I will not marry a man who does not understand the weight of this union. But I believe you are ready." Darius looked at her, his resolve hardening. The challenges ahead would be unlike anything he had ever faced, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a purpose beyond just fighting. This was about unity, strength, and something that was worth fighting for: his new family, his new home, and the future of the galaxy. He bowed his head slightly. "I won't let you down, Queen Kyra." She gave a small, approving nod. "Then let us begin." The days leading up to the wedding were a blur of preparations, strategy meetings, and tense negotiations. Captain Darius Holt found himself in the middle of a political storm, juggling his duties as a soldier and his new role as the consort-to-be of Queen Kyra. Buff. He had known that their union would send shockwaves across the galaxy, but he hadn't fully realized just how much pressure and every decision they made, every move they took, was scrutinized by the Auxiliary Council and their allies. They were not just making history. They were forging a future that could change the course of the war against the Dominion. Darius stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring out at the void of space. The ship was currently stationed near the Auxiliary homeworld, and he could feel the tension in the air. The ceremony was only days away, and preparations were in full swing. It wasn't just a wedding. It was a spectacle, a statement to the entire galaxy that the Auxiliary and humans had forged a bond that no enemy could break. But as the time grew closer, Darius began to feel the weight of what he had agreed to. Lieutenant Cara Vance walked up beside him, her voice cutting through his thoughts. "You're still thinking about it, aren't you?" she asked, her tone softer than usual. "The wedding, the future." Darius glanced at her, his expression a mix of uncertainty and resolve. "I can't help it. This whole thing feels like a dream. One minute I'm just a captain trying to save lives, and now I'm about to marry the queen of an alien species. It's a lot to process." Kara smiled faintly, though her eyes were filled with concern. "You're doing the right thing, Darius. I know it's hard, but this could be our chance to change the tide of this war. The Auxiliary are fierce fighters, and with you by Kyra's side, we'll have the strength to take down the Dominion." Darius nodded, but a nagging feeling still lingered in the back of his mind. He had always been a soldier, a leader in battle. But this wasn't like any war he had ever fought. This wasn't just about strategy and firepower. It was about a future he hadn't even begun to understand. As the days passed, Darius spent more and more time with Kyra. Despite the cold, calculating demeanor she often showed in public, he began to see a different side of her in private. She was a ruler, yes, but she was also a woman who had lived through loss, betrayal, and countless battles. And yet, she still held on to the hope that this marriage, this alliance, could be the key to ending the war with the Dominion. One evening, as they sat together in the royal chambers of the Vanguard, Kyra spoke of her past, of the struggles her people had faced, and of the sacrifices they had made. Darius listened intently, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. "We have fought for so long," Kyra said, her voice quiet but filled with determination. "The Dominion has taken so much from us, our families, our cities, our future. But now, with your help, we can fight back. Together, we can reclaim what's ours. But this union, must be more than just a political marriage. It must be a symbol of our strength, a promise to our people that we will never surrender." Darius looked at her, seeing the fire in her eyes. She was not just a queen. She was a warrior, a leader who had dedicated her life to the survival of her people. And for the first time, Darius understood the full scope of what they were about to undertake. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a declaration of war against the Dominion, a statement that no matter the cost, they would fight to the end. "I'm ready," Darius said, his voice firm. "We'll do whatever it takes, together." Kyra smiled, the faintest hint of relief in her eyes. "I knew you would be." But as they spoke, a shadow loomed over the horizon. The Dominion fleet was advancing, their warships closing in on Auxiliary space. Time was running out. The wedding, once a symbol of hope, was now a race against time. Darius and Kyra knew that they couldn't afford to wait any longer. The battle for the future of the galaxy was about to begin, and it would be fought not just with weapons, but with the strength of their alliance and the courage of their hearts. As the final preparations for the ceremony continued, the tension in the air was palpable. Darius and Syra both knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but together they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The war was far from over, but this was their moment, their chance to change everything. And they would fight for it, no matter what. The tension in the air was thick as Captain Darius Holt stood at the front of the Grand Hall, the soft hum of the Vanguard's engines just a distant murmur behind him. The ceremony was moments away, and everything that had led up to this moment felt surreal. The galaxy's eyes were upon him and Queen Exira Valeth as they prepared to take their vows in an unprecedented union, an alliance between humans and the Exilari that would send ripples through the universe. The weight of the moment wasn't lost on Darius. He had known that saving the Queen's life would change his future, but he hadn't anticipated just how much responsibility would come with it. Marrying a queen wasn't just about standing at her side. It was about standing at the forefront of a battle for the future of an entire species. Darius' thoughts were interrupted by the soft click of boots against the floor. He turned to find Lieutenant Cara Vance approaching, her expression both serious and supportive. "You ready for this?" she asked, her voice low but filled with a hint of concern. "I guess ready is one way to put it," Darius replied, his tone slightly strained. "But ready or not, the whole galaxy is watching. This union could be the turning point in the war. It feels like too much weight for one person to carry." Cara smiled reassuringly. "You've been carrying heavy loads for years, Darius. You're a leader. You always have been. This is just another battle, but this time you've got an army behind you, and a queen at your side." Darius nodded, though a part of him still questioned whether he was truly prepared for what lay ahead. His life had always been about command, strategy, and surviving the next battle. But this marriage was something new, something far bigger than anything he had ever imagined. It wasn't just about warfare. It was about shaping the future of the galaxy. Before he could respond, the doors to the Grand Hall opened, and Queen Exira Valeth entered. Her presence was commanding, her regal steps drawing the eyes of every onlooker in the room. Darius couldn't help but be struck by the strength in her stride, the way she carried herself despite the political storm that surrounded them. She was a queen, yes, but more than that. She was a leader, a symbol of hope for her people. And now, in this moment, she was about to become his partner in a fight far greater than any war they had ever faced. Exira approached Darius, her expression a mixture of determination and something deeper, something that hinted at the connection that had begun to grow between them since the rescue. As she came to stand beside him, she looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is only the beginning, Captain. We are no longer just two individuals. We are a force, a united front. The Dominion will understand the power of what we're about to do." Darius turned his attention to her, his heart pounding. Despite everything, the weight of the situation, the eyes of the galaxy upon them, he felt a calmness in her presence. The battle for the future of the Exilari and humanity was about to begin, and together they would lead it. The ceremony commenced, and Darius and Sarah stood before the Exilari Council, surrounded by representatives from both their people and their allies. The air was charged with anticipation as they exchanged vows of unity and strength. The promises they made to each other weren't just about love. They were about duty, honor, and a future free from the tyranny of the Dominion. For Darius, the words felt heavier than they ever had before, and yet, as he stood there beside Syra, he knew that his commitment wasn't just to her, it was to the entire galaxy. They weren't just marrying for political gain. They were marrying to show the Dominion that they would not bend. When the ceremony concluded, a hushed silence fell over the room. Darius and Syra had pledged their lives to each other and to the fight ahead, and in doing so, they had forged an unbreakable bond. The crowd began to murmur in approval, but Darius knew that this was just the beginning. The Dominion wasn't going to back down because of a wedding, and their enemies were already plotting their next move. The Vanguard's mission was clear: protect the Xilari, safeguard their queen, and strike back at the Dominion. But Darius couldn't shake the feeling that there was more at play here than just military strategy. As he stood at Sarah's side, their hands clasped together, he realized that this war wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about building something new, something that could change the galaxy forever. Zyra turned to him, her gaze steady and unwavering. Darius looked back at her, a sense of determination settling deep within him. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but as long as they stood together, they could face anything. The fate of the galaxy rested in their hands, and they were ready to fight for it. The battle began sooner than anyone had expected. Barely hours after the ceremony, the Vanguard sensors picked up an incoming fleet. The Dominion, ever watchful of any sign of rebellion, had wasted no time in responding to the human Xilari alliance. Captain Darius Holt stood at the command console, his jaw set and his eyes focused. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, but his instincts kicked in. This was what he was trained for. This was the fight he had always known would come. Beside him, Lieutenant Kara Vance was already coordinating with the ship's tactical team, her voice a calm yet urgent presence in the chaos. "Captain, the Dominion fleet is massive. They're using an advanced cloaking system. We'll need to be careful." Darius nodded, his mind racing through options. "Get a reading on their positions. We can't afford to be caught off guard." As Kara worked her way through the system, Queen Xi Ravalith entered the bridge, her gaze as steady as ever, her presence a reminder of why they were all here. She had given everything for her people, and was now, once again, ready to fight for their future. "What's the status?" she asked, her voice a commanding whisper, despite the tension in the air. "Waiting on final data, Your Majesty," Darius replied, never once turning his attention from the screens before him. "We'll engage the fleet as soon as we have a lock on their positions." The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the rapid beeping of the ship's systems. It was clear the Dominion had sent everything they had in response to the newly formed alliance. But Darius refused to let fear take hold. They had made a promise to their people. This wasn't just about surviving. It was about fighting back, showing the universe that they would not bow to the Dominion's rule. After what felt like an eternity, Kara's voice rang through the tense silence. "We've got them. They're moving in fast. Our best chance is to engage them before they can activate their full cloak." "Set course," Darius barked. "We'll take the fight to them." No hesitation. The Vanguard surged forward, its weapons systems powering up. The ship shuddered slightly as the crew prepared for battle, but Darius stood tall, his mind clear. He was used to the pressure of commanding a crew in times of danger, but now, with Zyra standing beside him, the stakes felt even higher. This wasn't just a mission. It was a defining moment for the galaxy, and he wouldn't let it slip away. As the two fleets closed in on each other, the Dominion ships finally broke free from their cloak, revealing their full strength. The Vanguard was outnumbered, but Darius had learned over the years that size didn't always matter. It was about strategy, coordination, and the will to fight. And he knew that the Vanguard's crew had the courage to face whatever came their way. Zyra's voice cut through the tension, her words filled with the authority of a queen who had led her people through countless battles. "We will win this, Captain. Together, we will push them back." Darius met her gaze, his resolve hardening. "We'll fight for our future, Your Majesty." The first shots were fired. The Vanguard's weapons lit up the darkness of space, striking the first of the Dominion ships. The battle was fierce, but the crew of the Vanguard fought with a unity that Darius had never seen before. It wasn't just about the technology or firepower. It was about the bond they had formed, the belief that they were fighting for something bigger than themselves. And Zyra's presence, her leadership, only fueled their determination. As the battle raged on, The Dominion's fleet began to falter. Darius could see it in the movement of their ships, the way they hesitated for a fraction of a second longer than they should have. The Exilarian humans had come together, and the Dominion had underestimated the strength of that union. But just as it seemed the tide was turning in their favor, a new threat emerged from the darkness, a massive Dominion warship, larger than anything they had encountered before. Its weapons were powerful, its defenses almost impenetrable. The Vanguard took a hit, and the ship rocked violently. Alarms blared, and the crew scrambled to keep control of the ship. "We've got a major breach on Deck 3, Kara shouted, her voice sharp with urgency. "We need to take that ship down, or we're done for." Darius gritted his teeth, his mind working overtime. The battle was far from over, but he refused to give up. "Get us in close. We'll take their weapons out first." As the Vanguard moved toward the enormous warship, Darius' eyes never left the view ahead. He could feel the tension in the air, the pressure mounting with every passing second. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for their future, and he wasn't about to let it slip away. "Get ready," Darius said, his voice steady. "This is our moment." The Vanguard was taking a pounding. Despite their best efforts, the massive Dominion warship loomed ominously in front of them, its firepower unrelenting. Captain Darius Holt stood at the helm, his hands gripping the command console as the ship shuddered under each blast. The alarms were blaring, and the crew was scrambling to keep things under control. But Darius didn't flinch. He had fought through worse. This battle was no different. "Captain, we can't keep taking hits like this," shouted Lieutenant Caravance, her voice filled with urgency. "Our shields are down to 30%. If we don't take out their weapons now, we won't last much longer." Darius looked up, his jaw clenched. He knew they were running out of time, and the weight of the decision settled heavily on his shoulders. The Dominion warship was far stronger than anything they had encountered before, but the Vanguard had one advantage: the element of surprise. And they had to use it. "Get us in closer," Darius ordered, his voice calm but firm. "We'll take out their weapons systems. Full power to forward shields. Bring us in within firing range." Kara nodded sharply and relayed the orders to the crew. The Vanguard pushed forward, dodging incoming blasts as it made its way toward the Dominion warship. The massive ship's guns fired relentlessly, but the Vanguard was nimble, far more nimble than the behemoth in front of them. The crew worked together seamlessly, adjusting the ship's course and speed to avoid being struck by the powerful weapons. In the command center, Queen Xi Ravalith stood beside Darius, her gaze fixed on the view ahead. The fire and fury of the battle raged around them, but she remained calm, a steady presence at his side. "We've trained for this moment," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "We will make it through, Darius. We are stronger than they realize." Darius glanced at her, his confidence bolstered by her words. Lyra's resolve was unshakable, and it inspired him to push even harder. Together, they had already done the impossible, defeating an entire fleet of Dominion forces, saving her life. And now, they would finish what they had started. "Focus on their main gun turrets," Darius ordered. "We can't let them fire again." The Vanguard closed the distance, its weapons primed and ready. The Dominion warship loomed closer, but now Darius could see the weak spots, where their shields had been worn down and where their defenses were vulnerable. He wasn't going to wait for the enemy to make the first move. "Fire," Darius commanded. The Vanguard's weapons unleashed a torrent of energy, striking the Dominion warship's massive weapons array. Sparks erupted as the shots landed, and for a moment, it seemed as though the entire ship shuddered. The Dominion warship's shields flickered, and its weapons began to slow. But they weren't out of the fight just yet. The Vanguard pressed on, the sounds of battle filling the air as it closed in on its target. The Dominion ship, now staggered from the hits, attempted to reposition, but the Vanguard was relentless. Each shot brought them closer to their goal, and Darius felt the rhythm of the battle shift in their favor. But then, A shockwave rattled the Vanguard, and the ship's hull groaned under the pressure. Another wave of fire from the Dominion ship had struck. The ship swayed, but Darius held his ground, forcing himself to remain calm despite the chaos around him. "Damage report," he barked. "We've lost a forward stabilizer," one of the crew members called back. "But we're still operational, Captain." "Good," Darius said, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his face. "We fight on." At that moment, Syra stepped forward, her voice carrying over the clamor of the bridge. "Do not forget, Darius, this is not just a fight for survival. It is a fight for freedom, for the future of the Exilari and humanity. You've done this before, and we will do it again." Darius met her gaze, the fire in her eyes igniting a fierce determination within him. Together, they had already overcome impossible odds, and now it was time to deliver the final blow. With renewed purpose, Darius turned back to the console. "Lock in the final coordinates. Let's end this." The Vanguard fired once more, its weapons hitting the Dominion warship in a concentrated barrage. The enemy ship's shields finally gave way, and with a final, resounding explosion, the massive warship began to break apart, its hull disintegrating into the void of space. The battle was over. The Vanguard and its crew had triumphed, and as Darius and Syra stood side by side, the realization set in. They had just delivered the first of many blows to the Dominion. The war was far from over, but this victory marked the beginning of a new chapter for humanity and the Exilari. And Darius knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The Vanguard had just emerged victorious from one of the hardest battles it had ever faced. The Dominion fleet was broken, but the damage to their ship was significant. Captain Darius Holt stood on the bridge, staring out at the remains of the enemy warship, his mind racing. They had won, yes, but they hadn't destroyed the entire Dominion force. This was only the beginning. The crew had proven their strength, and now, Darius knew, they would need to prepare for what was coming next. Lieutenant Kara Vance was at the tactical station, her fingers flying over the controls as she monitored their systems. "Captain, we've sustained some heavy damage, but nothing that can't be repaired. We'll need to make a stop at the nearest station for supplies and repairs." Darius nodded. He was already aware of the ship's condition, but it was still hard to take in. The Vanguard had taken a beating, and some of the crew were nursing injuries. But they had pulled through, and that's what mattered. "Understood, Lieutenant," Darius said, turning his attention to Queen Syra Valeth, who had been standing silently beside him, watching the battlefield unfold. Despite the chaos, Syra's calm demeanor had been a constant source of strength for him and the crew. Now, as the battle ended and their ship limped toward safety, her presence reminded him of the true importance of what they had just achieved. Syra turned toward Darius, her gaze steady and unwavering. "This victory is more than just a battle won, Captain. It is a message to the Dominion and the galaxy alike. They will understand that the Exilari and humanity are united, and nothing can break that." Darius met her eyes, the weight of her words sinking in. They had done the impossible, not just defeating the Dominion in this battle, but uniting two species, two worlds, against a common enemy. It was a monumental achievement, one that had the potential to change the course of history. But he knew that it wasn't over yet. The Dominion would retaliate, and the war would continue. "Agreed," Darius said quietly, "but we can't rest yet. This is only a single victory. We'll need to regroup, rebuild, and strengthen our forces. We have no idea what the Dominion will do next, but I can guarantee they won't take this lightly." Syra nodded. Her expression hardened with the same determination that Darius saw in his own reflection. "We will be ready. And in the meantime, we'll continue building our alliance, recruiting others to our cause. This is just the beginning of something much bigger." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Darius knew that Syra's resolve was as unshakable as his own. But even with their unity and strength, the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. He couldn't help but wonder what would happen next, how many more battles they would face before this war was over. As the Vanguard made its way toward the nearest station for repairs, the crew began to settle into their roles. The immediate crisis had passed, but the atmosphere on the ship was still tense. Everyone knew that while they had won this battle, the real war was far from over. Darius took a deep breath and moved toward the center of the bridge, where the crew had gathered for their debrief. They had worked together as a team, each person playing their part, and it had made all the difference. Now, it was time to plan their next move. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us," Darius began, addressing the crew. "We're going to need to rebuild our strength, and we'll be making a lot of stops along the way to gather supplies, reinforce our forces, and get intel on the Dominion's next move. We can't afford to be caught off guard again." Kara spoke up, her tone filled with practicality. "We'll need to make contact with the other Allied forces, Captain. The more allies we have, the better our chances of pushing the Dominion back." Zara nodded in agreement. "I will reach out to our allies in the Xilari Empire, but we must also consider the humans we get to contact. There are factions scattered throughout the galaxy that might not be aware of our efforts. We need to spread the word." Darius looked at them both and smiled, a rare moment of ease. Despite everything that had happened, he could see how far they had come. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. "All right," Darius said, his voice resolute. "Let's get to work. The Dominion won't stop, and neither will we. We'll fight for the future of both our people, and we'll win this war, together." With that, the crew of the Vanguard set their course. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they had a purpose now, and nothing would stop them from achieving it. Together, humanity and the Xilari would stand against the Dominion, no matter what it took. The war had only just begun, but Captain Darius Holt could feel the weight of everything on his shoulders. As the Vanguard sailed through the stars, heading toward their next destination, he couldn't help but think about all that they had been through. The battle with the Dominion had been a turning point, a victory that showed them what they were capable of. But it had also revealed just how much more they had to do to truly stand a chance against the Dominion's might. Lieutenant Caravance was at her station, tapping away at her console as she gathered intel on their next target. The crew was tired, their bodies bruised and worn from the battle. But the fire in their hearts hadn't dimmed. They had just won a major victory, and now they would keep fighting, no matter the cost. "Captain," Kara said, breaking his thoughts, "we've received a message from the Outer Rim colonies. They've agreed to join our alliance. It's a small victory, but it could mean a lot if we can get more planets on our side." Darius smiled. Every new ally was another step toward turning the tide of the war. "That's good news, Lieutenant. Keep them updated on our progress. The more people we have working together, the stronger we'll become." Beside Darius, Queen Xiravalith stood tall, her eyes fixed on the stars outside. The Xilari had lost so much in this war already, and yet Syra's resolve had only grown stronger. She was not only a queen, she was a symbol of hope for her people, and Darius knew that they had to keep pushing forward. They couldn't afford to let the Dominion tear apart everything they had worked so hard for. Zyra turned to Darius, her voice calm but firm. "The Outer Rim colonies are a step in the right direction, Captain, but we must be cautious. The Dominion will not sit idly by. They will retaliate. It's only a matter of time." "I know," Darius replied, "but the longer we fight, the more people will join us. The Dominion can't keep crushing every planet they come across. We'll show them that unity is stronger than fear." As the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for the next phase of their mission, Darius found himself thinking about the future. What would it take to win this war? He couldn't afford to think just about the next battle. He had to think about the entire war, the big picture. The Vanguard couldn't do it alone. They needed more ships, more resources, and more allies if they were going to challenge the Dominion's overwhelming power. Darius met Sarah's gaze once more. We've made a lot of progress, but I think we need to go on the offensive. If we strike at Dominion supply lines, we might be able to disrupt their entire operation. Cut off the head, so to speak. Sarah considered the idea for a moment. It's a risky move, but if we can cripple their resources, it could buy us time. Time to gather more allies. Time to strengthen our forces. We have to take the risk, Darius said, his voice resolute. We can't wait for the Dominion to come to us. If we let them take the initiative, we'll be at their mercy. We fight on our terms, or we don't fight at all. The room fell silent for a moment, and then Kara spoke up again. I've sent out the coordinates. We're just a few days out from a Dominion outpost. If we hit it hard, we can cause some serious damage. Darius nodded. Then we'll hit it hard. Get the crew ready. We're going to make them regret underestimating us. As the crew prepared for another mission, Darius couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. But he knew one thing for sure. They weren't going to give up. Not now. Not ever. They had already come so far, and there was no turning back. The Vanguard was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of defiance, of hope, and of unity between humanity and the Exilari. And together, they would fight until the very end. The crew worked tirelessly, their energy fueled by the belief that they were fighting for something bigger than themselves. As the Vanguard prepared to launch its next strike, Darius looked out at the stars, his mind racing. This was far from over. But as long as they had each other, he knew they could face whatever came next. With Xyra by his side, the crew ready for battle, and the fire of determination in their hearts, Darius was certain of one thing. The Dominion would learn that they had underestimated the power of unity. The Vanguard and its crew would keep fighting, no matter how many battles they had to face. This war was theirs to win, and they would not stop until victory was theirs.